you guys to walk out of here with a couple of key things. So as you're continuing to write stuff down, we were talking earlier that Dale Carnegie has a 4-day class on change. So we're going to whittle that down into an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We're just that efficient. So key takeaways I think will be important for you guys, and then maybe we're going to come back to you guys and help educate on what one or two key initiatives are. Our panelists are Matthew. Matt's fine. Matt is fine. Matt is president and CEO of Linkage. He leads Linkage team of consultants across the globe, specializes in helping organizations address their business challenges through accelerating the development and performance of their careers. He has led teams and client assignments in over 50 countries, working with more than 30 Fortune 500 companies. He has a BA in psychology and an MBA in executive leadership from Nebraska Lincoln. Julene joined Dale Carnegie in 2004 as a sales representative and became a trainer in 2005. In her role as trainer, she focuses on facilitating specialized programs to clients based on their expectations. We actually have engaged Dale Carnegie in several of those. Expectations develop those programs from start to finish. She instructs Dale Carnegie skills for success in high-impact presentation courses, as well as all seminars administered by the franchise. In 2010, she was named one of the top trainers in North America. She has recently completed certification to be Certified Employee Engagement Specialist, conducted by Bob Helker from Employee Engagement Group. In her spare time, she enjoys running marathons. God bless. Yoga, cooking with spices, and reading. She also holds a certificate in opera. And we've been trying to get her to sing, and she hasn't done it yet, but maybe you guys can help us.
It's not going to happen today.
That's filled with vodka, so we'll see. Brendan Davis, Davis Company's president. Brendan's tenure with the Davis Companies has included all facets of staffing, from recruitment to sales to national office expansion to senior leadership responsibility. Brendan's focus has propelled Davis to the forefront in the talent acquisition industry, resulting in Davis being 6-time Inc. 5,500 fastest growing companies. His leadership has helped Davis acquire numerous awards, including Boston Business Journal and Atlanta's Chronicle's Best Places to Work, as well as several other family business awards. Brendan is a speaker at the MPG Group, Marlboro Economic Development Committee, as well as several others. He is a panelist at local high schools and trade schools and graduated with a BA in sociology from University of New Hampshire. Welcome. So today we're talking about change. Good news is everyone's here, so at least you're open to it. So before we jump into some of the questions in the panel, has anyone ever gone to a change management class or been in a conversation about change management? Not with your manager saying, hey, we need to change, or like gone into a class and understood a change management process? Okay. So one out of 39, so that's good that we're going to hit this topic, because there's a lot of different models for change. So we're going to talk about, before we start, a couple of the models used from a very high level overview. We don't want the engineering answer, we want just kind of the 50,000 foot answer on some of the models that are used. And I know Julene and Matt can both speak to these, but I think it'll give some context for the questions we're going to ask. So starting with Matt, I know you and I talked outside about the model that you guys use, but can you give us maybe the 50,000 foot view of not necessarily what you use, but just what goes into a change model?
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into the details, but the one we use is a model called transitions, which really looks at a current state and a future state. And there's sort of current state you can imagine being lower left, future state being upper right on a 2x2. And you've got a period of transition you have to go through to get to the future state. And one of the key things to get out of your current state is you have to make the case for change. So leadership has to explain why change is important. An even more simple level than that, though, so Julene's marathon example got me thinking about what it takes to run a marathon. So you can't just be willing to run a marathon. So I could say, you know what, I'm running a marathon, and I could get out there, I get to the end of the parking lot, that'd be about as far as I'd go. So being willing to do it doesn't mean I'm able to run a marathon. So when we think about the current state, you've got to look at both the organization and individuals, both willingness and ability. So before I can run a marathon, I've got to first drop 20 pounds, then I've got to run a quarter mile, then a half mile, then a mile, and gradually work my way up to it. And so when we think about getting to that future state, it's around building that willingness and ability to get out of your current state and through that sort of chapter of transition on towards the future changed state is a simple level how we think about change.
Yeah, so from the Dale Carnegie perspective, we actually use a variety of different models that you may have heard of, but one of the ones that really resonates with us, and we also find is something that's really easier for many of our customers to really be able to resonate with, is the Lewin model. Because there's essentially, when you look at it, there's 3 phases, right? So, and I personally think it's easy to remember too, which is the first is to unfreeze, right? So to figure out, you know, we're in a state where we need to change, something needs to shift, and you figure out what's the transition that needs to take place. And within that, there are 5 other stages that, you know, I'll touch upon today as we have this conversation, but it's really about unfreezing ourselves from the current situation, figuring out where we need to go. And the second phase from there is the transition. So what's actually happening? What are the steps we're actually putting into place? And as Matt just said, which is, you know, you run the quarter mile, you run the half mile, and then also it's how are you holding yourself accountable for that change taking place and saying, okay, I'm going to get up to that 26 miles and be able to do it. And so during the transition, that's really the meat of it, and we'll talk more about it as leaders and also as employees. What are some of the things that we need to do in order to foster that change? And then the last piece of it being the refreezing, right? So we start with that and we end with it because we're going to refreeze now into a new state of being. So how is it that we put ourselves in that transitional phase, we come out of it, and now we're in a new state, and how do we keep that consistent? How do we make sure that there's a level of comfort and that we did the right thing, and also that it's sustainable? So there's a little bit more complexity within all of those steps, but we like to look at from that 3-phase approach to really just break it down so it's not as overwhelming. So as everybody knows, is that with any change initiative, there's going to be resistance. So how can we break it down as much as possible to create more something more tangible for the people that work with us and for us?
Great. Good. I'm going to go off the cuff a little bit here. I know you guys hate that change stuff. But as far as like the processes of change, everyone in here is probably some level of leadership or wanting to be in leadership. Where does change typically fail? We'll go to Julie for that.
Where does it fail?
Where does it fail? Is it, in big overview, is it the first bucket, if you don't really do this well, then nothing else matters, or?
Well, you know, and just from the model I just spoke about is that you're really going to put yourself in a place of failure if you don't start from really getting clear on what the change is and what the necessary steps are to take. Because oftentimes what we see happening in organizations is there's not that sense of clarity and communication within the organization as to what the change is and why, and really getting that buy-in, that if you don't have that, you're going to be in a position where you're going to fail right from the get-go. So, you know, from the beginning is that if there's not that sense of clarity, then you're going to be in a place where all of the other steps, you're going to be backtracking consistently because you don't have the answers that you need in order to move forward. So right from the get-go, that's what we see, at least organizationally, we help customers manage change, is that sense of clarity as to what and why, and deliver that communication with a strategy throughout the organization. Otherwise, you're bound to be in a position where you're not going to execute in the way that you should.
There's another thing about change is identifying, is change something that's, you're changing for the sake of change, or you're changing for a good reason,
Right.
is probably something that any organization needs to identify before they go through any change management, any type of a plan at all. So, being able to kind of ask yourselves questions and ask as a leadership team, or if you're part of the leadership team or involved in, some of the direction of the company, being able to make sure that the mission behind why you're changing makes sense, and there's certain criteria that hit to allow change to be, not just something that you're changing for the sake of change, and you're not going to be in a better place at the end of that. 3 things that I had kind of written down to identify the need for change was, what needs to change to better serve your customers, so your current customers. 2 was what needs to change to profitably create new customers in whatever the businesses are. And then 3rd, importantly, corporate culture, what changes need to occur to better serve your workforce and improve their resources so that they can influence the top 2 that we just kind of suggested, meaning your current customers and future customers. So when you're kind of walking through that to make sure that whatever the cause may be, making sure that you're not having change happen just for the sake of change is really important, because you will never be able to launch and have sustainable change management happen if the true core of why you're doing it isn't genuine.
Matt, we're going to move in a 2-part question here from another layer into it. I heard the other day that for the first time in the workforce that there's 5 generations. So assuming that everyone learns and hears and sees things differently. We hear a lot about millennials. Does everyone have millennials that are working for that were in their workforce? So there's one particular dynamic. But when creating buy-in, how can we create buy-in at an organization with teams who like the status quo or who are just happy being happy?
Well, I mean, so one of the things I tell my clients all the time is that almost every organization is perfectly designed to get exactly the outcomes they're getting. So if you're growing, you're designed perfectly to grow. If you're shrinking or flat, you're designed perfectly for the shrinking or flat outcomes you're getting right now. And so I think the first thing is to change, people have to be dissatisfied with the status quo at some level, whether that is they want more or that they're not happy with the work they're doing. So to Brendan's point around, change in service of what? In service of growing new customers, or getting new customers, better serving our existing, creating a better place to work. So I think that people, if you go back from generation to generation, millennia to millennia, societies are change. People don't like to change. So creating that case is the first place where it can break down. That holds true across generations. I think if you don't get that, you've got complacency. You've got to create a vision, a common vision that everybody understands, but might understand differently. So the common vision might sound different to a brand new employee who's really looking for a career path than it might look or sound to a lifetime sales rep who is simply looking at how to make as much money as he or she can, as quickly as he or she can. So creating that common vision in a way that different audiences, different groups understand it in a way that's meaningful to them. I think that's really the key to getting the diverse generations on board with a case for change.
Yeah, well, I would resonate with that. The first thing that came into my head when Ryan was asking that question is messaging. And one of the things that we always advocate for is what's the communication strategy from the top that's going to communicate through this change. And so that would be, if you're thinking about it's an organizational change or it's going to affect multiple teams, the messaging needs to be different. And oftentimes we see that the messages aren't tailored enough for that person on the marketing team or that person on the manufacturing team to say, hey, what's in it for me with this change? So that's what they want to know. So really crafting and tailoring a communication strategy that resonates, whether it's generations, whether it's department-wise, whether it's level of employee, it's really important that we really put the time and the effort to think about what is in it for them and what are they going to respond to. Also, the other thing we need to think about if we're talking about the generations is modality. Some of our long-term seasoned workers that have been working for the company for 25 years, are they going to want to hear about the change from social media? Are they going to want to hear about the change from an email? No, they're going to want their senior leader or their leader to come to them personally and start talking with them as a seasoned member of the organization. Here's what we're going to do. So it's a multifaceted approach, and if we don't take that approach, then we can get ourselves into a situation where there's lack of buy-in because there's not an investment from that individual because they understand how it affects them. So the communication strategy, how you're going to do it, who you're going to communicate it to, is critical in messaging that change.
Okay, so a lot of what I'm hearing in the language and what I've done in my research is the word why. So change starts with why, and people don't understand the why.
Right.
It becomes ineffective. So as leaders, we can be in a position to go, well, we need to change because our CAPAs aren't getting turned around on time, or X, Y, and Z. But if the other people don't understand the why, then they don't really understand why they're going to change, and it seems to fall apart from there. So kind of same question to Brendan, and maybe even some examples is, what are some examples of a change initiative? And how do you get the why out there for all to hear?
So I think I talked a little bit about identifying first. So when you look at change in an organization, you look at identifying, leading the change initiative, and then managing it, kind of the sustainability of whatever that change is taking place. So you really, kind of similar to what I was saying before, you really need to identify what that cause looks like, and to Julian's point, is how is that going to affect different individuals within the organization in any way. So based upon their job scope, based upon their goals and objectives, based upon the company's goals and objectives, what are the things, and you really as a leadership team, you have to think 5 steps ahead about how people will react so that you can prepare for being able to deal with what the reactions are going to be based on the different individuals that are within your organization. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, hopefully we'll get to this too, is identifying how different people react to change and kind of bulking them into 3 or 4 major categories so that how you can, based upon their persona, who they are in the organization, their roles, responsibilities, or what motivates them, how you handle those folks in any change initiative.
Matt, you mentioned change being involved in high-performing teams, low-performing teams. Moving to the next question here is, how many people have change initiatives on their plate right now? How many people have something that they're working on changing or modifying or trying to get the team bought into it? Just everyone here, pretty much. So having you walk away with some things is there's probably some teams that are performing, there's teams that aren't performing, there's quality issues, there's performance issues, there's revenue generation, sums up a bunch of it. Why is change needed if the current strategies and tactics are working well? So if we're in a good growth plan, we're happy with it, why do we need to change?
That's a tricky one. I mean, so I think, first of all, organizations that I come across now don't just have a change initiative going on. It's typically a portfolio of, 2 or 3 or dozens of different change initiatives. It might be, going through a space remodel at the same time as a new go-to-market strategy, at the same time as we figure out how we're going to digitally serve customers we serve in bricks and mortar fashion today. There's 3 separate, totally unrelated change initiatives going on. So I think that's first. There's not just either we're going through change or not. It's a portfolio of many changes often going on. And secondly, I think just based on what we see in the marketplace is if you're not constantly evolving, you're necessarily falling behind. It's kind of, I go back to the exercise analogy. If you're not exercising a muscle, the muscle's getting smaller, weaker, less effective. So our perspective is that even an organization that's doing extremely well has to continue to evolve and adapt. Otherwise, the competition will out-evolve and out-adapt you. And there's just really no way to keep pace with competition if you're not continuously challenging your assumptions and making changes.
Julian, I'm going to go to the same question with you and add a little component to it is, as a leadership organization, you can be caught in this constant, we need to change, we need to change, we need to change. And essentially that's part of our jobs. We're trying to create the performance of the organization. So for maybe people in the audience, how do they put themselves in a position to have that constant change agent, but also how do they get their high-performing teams or medium performing teams to change? How do we create that?
How do you create the buy-in, right? Or how do you
So two-part question. If I'm sitting in the audience, and I can pretty much use Scott from the quality department, there's something that you're always working on changing. So the team could be looking at Scott going, here we go again, Scott wants to change how we're doing CAPAs, or Scott wants to change this, and that can be a position where if they don't understand that constant needs to be happening, Scott's the bad guy.
Right.
So how does Scott create within his organization that there needs to be that constant flow of change?
Okay, so, similar to what Matt was just saying is that, if your company or your team wants to grow and continue to be sophisticated, change is inevitable because we all have, all of our companies and teams have a vision that we want to achieve, right? So part of that, and if I think about it from a, department perspective, and we'll use you as an example, reporting into a senior leader in the organization, is our teams want to understand, going back to the why. So if we're not doing a job as leaders linking the purpose behind the change to the corporate strategy that they see directly affects their job or their day-to-day, there's not going to be that buy-in. They're always going to be thinking that you're the bad cop. So why do we keep on changing? Well, it's about continuing to communicate and link that change to almost the higher purpose of what this contributes to, but also what's in it for me, right? And so what's in it for me as the individual has to be consistently going with the flow of my boss coming to me and saying, we're changing this process again or this process again. It's about the communication again of the why, linking it to the larger corporate strategy. What does it have to do with that? And then what does it have to do with me? And typically what we see, and I don't know if you see this too, Matt, is that is something that falls short. The communication piece is so critical, and you see a lot of people throwing their hands up in the air in companies and saying, well, I don't know why we're doing this. I don't know what the purpose is behind it. And also as leaders, we need to make sure that we're getting the employee's perspective and getting a pulse on what's going on and what's their mindset about it. And it's not just throwing it out there without being accountable to be answering those tough questions and linking it to a higher purpose. Because if they don't see that, then again, we're going to be in this pattern of continuous bad cop, but also continuous change with no purpose and no buy-in. And so essentially you're going to be going back and changing things even more so because there was not buy-in from the beginning.
Okay, good. We'll go to the audience in 1 second here for questions. One thing in the past, one that you're talking about, I think you talked about on one of these, was kind of like a feedback tour. So asking the employees why and starting the process that way for the need to change is one thing that I think we've used in the past, where it's they're communicating what needs to change to us. Essentially, we kind of already know parts of it that need to change, but getting the perspective of the employee, I think, is a really important part. And the feedback tour is one where you're actually asking the questions. If you ask somebody a question saying, how do you think we're performing? Most people in your team, or a high-performing team, are going to go, I think we could get better with this, or I believe we could do better with that. And then essentially you're creating this Dale Carnegie. We'll take this quote from Dale Carnegie. By the way, I'm the only one on the internet quoted saying this. People believe in a world they create, right? That's a Dale Carnegie quote. If they're a part of the change, how much faster does that accelerate the actual change happening? So here's Ryan telling us what we need to do again. So I think the feedback tour was one thing we did before. It was important. Questions from the audience at this point, or does anyone have an initiative that they're trying to do and would have a question of what might you do to create change in this scenario? Everyone that knows me, you don't raise your hand, I'm calling on somebody. So go ahead.
Is there a correlation to how you message based on how long an employee's been with the company?
Great question. Brendan, we're going to have you field that first, and then have to come to you.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good, I said, identifying and leading change and the identification of certain folks in the organization. When I was thinking about this, I found a great article that broke it down into 4 categories. You have a victim, right? So in any change management, you have 4 categories of folks or how they react to change. You have a victim, a person that feels personally attacked by the change because something's going to happen to their job description or their responsibilities or how it's everything's happening to them, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, you have the wallflower, someone that's running under the radar. They could care less whether change happens or not. They're probably more in a a job function or a job role than in a career, right? Someone that wants to kind of fly under the radar and not be affected. As long as we get to where we're going, they're good handling their job. The last two are the most important ones to affect change. The third would be the assassin, right? Or the neutral bystander. I'm sorry, the critic. The assassin or the critic. And it's someone that is either openly against change for whatever personal objectives, or they don't agree with your leadership or management style, or they're doing it under the radar, right? So they're having side conversations to undermine a lot of those things. And the fourth is the hero, or the person that's really behind change. Those are the folks that you are arm in arm with, fighting the battle to whatever the end goal may be. So what's important about identifying those four is how you deal with those different groups, right? So just because you have an assassin or a critic in your group doesn't necessarily mean that you need to exit that person out of the organization, right? One of the things that I've actually learned, we're a second generation company, right? So whereas my father started the business in the 80s and it was one person, commander-in-chief, he said what happens and we move forward with that decision. Being able to identify when a second generation comes in, where it's myself, my brother, the CFO, the CEO, all in a room together, now having their own objectives, being able to identify roles where if you have an individual within a group that might be a critic, put them in a role to be able to shoot holes in whatever the objective is. So if you define that role, and you define that in front of everyone, so this change initiative doesn't happen, and their role and responsibility is to be able to identify things that might go wrong or problems that might come up, then all of a sudden you've turned someone that is truly against your cause to begin with into someone that's actually helping make that cause better and more efficient. And the fourth one we talked about, hero, is making sure that you're involving that person earlier on in the discussion of how to make change happen and why change is happening, so that they're out there beating the street and trying to drum up, they're trying to be a cheerleader for whatever that is. So you look at the last two as being more crucial to be able to make sure that any type of change initiative happens. So I know that was, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think it's the categorization of that is definitely true in our organization and when we partner with customers as we see change initiatives happen in there as well.
And I think to add on to your point there, just explaining to those people what their role is and what you're expecting, and that just because you shoot a hole in it doesn't mean that that's the right hole. We still may move forward with it. So we joke and say we have a chief warrant officer. That's it. We want you to worry about what we're saying, and they kind of bring you back into reality sometimes too if you're getting overly ambitious. Matt, you were going to jump on that question?
Yeah, and Brendan, actually, I loved your categorizations, and I think particularly the critics, getting them, not necessarily getting them on your team, but letting them be critics is really important, and giving them some safe space to be critical of change initiatives. It lends more credence. I've typically tried to, I've asked, just gone very direct route and said, hey, I'm help on this. We're going through this change. I know you're resistant. You've got some concerns about it. I want you to help me think about all of the potential eventualities that could happen with this, and help look at where this could go wrong, where this could lead us astray. People who are against change tend to like to have some room to do that. To answer your frequency question, is it Paul? Sorry. Yes. Paul. The old rule of thumb you hear all the time, I don't know where I heard it, is that you have to say something 7 times before people actually absorb it. A couple jobs ago, I ran the research group for Edelman, which is a big communications firm. And the actual number is 12. So people have to hear things 12 times before they actually internalize a message. And that holds true whether it's a B2B audience, a consumer audience, an employee audience. And today it has to happen in more and more formats. So I've got to hear it, during my bathroom break. I've got to hear it on text from my best friend down the hall. I've got to hear it in the town hall. I've got to see it on email. I've got to hear it from my customers. So you've got to hear it in the same thing consistently in different formats as well. I think the diversity and ubiquity of how many formats we have makes that job that much more complicated, especially with the generations.
Yeah, and in some generations it's not real unless it's on email. Right. I heard it, but I never got the email. Questions, additional questions from the audience?
What are some of the signs if the pace of the change or just the volume after the change is more than the organization can absorb?
Sure. So just, it sounded like a two-part question. So how do you know if the pace and the volume of change is too much?
You're just moving too quickly.
You're moving too
People are
quickly.
just kind of shell shocked.
Mhm.
I have my idea of the answer, but I'd like to hear what any of you
Sure.
have to
So,
say.
I mean, the first thing is that, you know, change comes about in addition to doing regular business. Isn't that right? So in addition to the objectives that we have, that we also are going through a system, say systems process change, branding change, whatever it might be. But in the meantime, we still need to be on track to do what we need to do every day. So once you see that something is taking over and it's interfering with the efficiency of everyday business and accomplishing the goals that you need to on a daily, monthly, you know, quarterly basis, then you need to reevaluate where are you spending your time. Because, you know, things still need to, you know, move forward in a fashion that you're not sacrificing the objectives that you have in the midst of, you know, maybe changing something that is going to impact the business a year from now. So first is it affecting our, you know, our objectives on a daily basis? Our employees who are potentially key people who are working on the change, are we seeing too much time being spent on something that is going to be impacting the business in the future and not taking care of today? That's one thing. I'd say the next thing is, and I'm seeing this currently actually with a customer that I'm working on, is that they're in such a constant state of change that they're now sacrificing in terms of retention, because people are seeing things changing so rapidly and so much that they don't feel a part of something, that once they feel like they're at a place where there's status quo and they can breathe for a month or two, something else starts to happen, and they don't feel secure in the environment that they're working in every day. And so they're seeing that because they were introducing so many changes so rapidly, and for this customer it was with new products in a very hot market, that they were they had all these people who were the intellectual capital saying, you know what, this is a little too much, and they started to leave. So retention became their issue. I would also say, and Brendan said it before, is culture. I mean, culture is a huge indication of the attitude of your people on a daily basis as they're coming into work. Is it sacrificing the culture that there's so much happening that they're dissatisfied with coming into work every day? And for, I don't know if any of you were here last year, we talked about engagement. Is engagement being affected by the amount of shifts and changes that are happening in your business? Take a look at your culture, and if that's being affected, then you know there might need to be some scale down at the pace in which you're moving with some of these initiatives that are seen as really important to the business. And prioritization. So those would be 3 indicators immediately.
What would signs of lack of engagement during a change initiative be? Just things that you could look out for if you're sitting here going, I got one of those in my office. What are some signs that you would talk about?
I would say number 1 would be, if we're talking about a specific team, the dynamics of the environment. I mean, simply from, are people feeling more overwhelmed? Is there a lack of collaboration in the culture? Do people seem like they're just checking out because they're overwhelmed? Is there a higher level of stress that you're seeing experience and change in terms of leaders looking at the change in our employees' behavior or their ability to relate to each other or relate to us? That's a really important thing. Also, culturally speaking, is, you know, I think we see this a lot too, is lack of communication from employees. When some people feel overwhelmed, they just shut down. So there's a shutdown in communication. We're not seeing that transition is taking place in a healthy way, or people are being able to express how they're feeling about it. And if there's shutdown happening as well, that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. And as leaders, if we're ones that are monitoring the change, we should be constantly looking for their perception throughout.
Good. There we go.
How do you, as a leader, control the message to the external stakeholders, like your customer or maybe a venture capitalist, or somebody who is seeing the, or feeling the effect of the change? And it's going to be disruptive no matter what you do, even if everybody's bought in. But how do you control that message to the customer so that you're keeping your customer happy?
Matt, you've got a lot of experience in that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't want to tell them everything. I think that's one of the most important things is, you know, you want your customers to be somewhat insulated from the change, except for the elements that are going to directly affect them here and now, whether it's positive or negative. So I think being as transparent as you need to be to let them know exactly this is look, customer prices are going up in the next 6 months. This is that affect them. Here's why that's good. You're going to get better people on this assignment. You're going to get faster service, higher quality, lower errors, whatever the outcomes the customer cares about. But communicating as much as you need to get them comfortable so they can see what the case for change is. I think that's really important. The other thing with external stakeholders is, in my experience, it's letting them know as much as you need, as much as you have to, but not everything, and making them feel like they're on the same side of the table. So I'm thinking about my firm recently. Since I've come on, we've gone through a repricing initiative. So our rates have not been stepping up with the marketplace over the last several years. I'm a new CEO. I've been here 8 months. Our rates have sort of stayed the same throughout the last 5 years, which while labor rates have gone up, while we're paying our people more, our customers are paying their people more, we had to charge more higher prices. So we're going through a price increase initiative. And we're doing it sort of contract by contract. So I have one of our largest clients who just renewed their contract this morning, and he was arguing about this 8% increase in fees. And basically I explained, look, if you don't, this is what we're doing. You can lock in your rates for the next 3 years if you have a 3-year agreement. So we had a sort of sales negotiation, and I made something in it for them to lock in for 3 years. It was good for me. I've got a 3-year contract now. He's not getting rate increases again for the next 2 years, so he gets to go back to flat rates for the next 3 years. So I think helping the same case for change for the customer, helping them understand what's in it for them. If it's a investor or venture capitalist, helping them understand what's in it for them. I think the investors are usually easier to sell on change than customers and employees. But I think communicating, making them feel like they're on this side of the table rather than that side of the table.
Good. Anyone else want to add anything on that one? All right. So back to the panelists. How is change different in times of growth compared to times of contraction? And considering it's a growing economy, I may change contraction to chaos as well. Both of those. Starting with Matt, why don't you take that one?
I think it's harder in times of growth. I think there's not as obvious a burning platform. It's easier to be comfortable with the status quo. So I think that's the first thing is you got to create an even more compelling case for why change is beneficial to whoever is being changed. The other thing I think that is tough in times of growth or success, let's call it, versus chaos or contraction is the role of the mid-manager. By mid-manager, I mean anybody who's not C-suite. So start sort of C-suite -1 is the population, the employee population at large almost always assumes that their managers know more about said change than they do. And so you've got these mid-level managers who are stuck having to sort of toe the company line, but they don't really know all of the ins and outs as to why, what, how, what are the implications 6 months or a year from now. I think that's maybe one of the hardest times of doing growth is that these managers don't know all of the whys and hows and whats. They still have to stick to the company line and try and somehow convince an employee about what's in it for them, while they might not even know the full answer to those stories. I think that's maybe the hardest part about changing that growth.
So how would you handle getting the mid-managers armed to answer those questions?
Well, I think it's, when we talk about making the case, the common vision, communicating 12 times, the big one I think most companies forget about is removing barriers. So these mid-level managers there might be a compensation barrier, there might be a performance review system that is a barrier to putting this change in place. And maybe our new change, thing we're changing towards, isn't measured in the performance review and management system. That's a barrier. So how do we remove that barrier to make it easier for managers to focus on what change they're implementing today? And then I think reinforcing progress that it's made, so making sure that we never hit that point of stasis. That once we evolve to the future state, that continues, that evolution sort of continues. Once change started. So I think the barrier removal is the area where we as leaders can make the biggest impact on managers doing their jobs well.
There's one other thing that I would probably add to that is focus on the wins, and however small they may be, focus on the wins within that fast environment. So if it's a quality system or it's a big push because you got a new customer, really go on above and beyond to recognize the things that people are doing to go above and beyond, because that's going to add horsepower and it's going to be contagious in other areas. In any type of an area of growth, you're going to have chaos, right? Which isn't going to be organized necessarily. Chaos is something that's going to affect your organization, and you're going to have to alter it at the end of whatever that growth period is to be able to make that platform sustainable again. But I think focusing on the wins and what people are doing right will allow you to, if there's failures or areas that are struggling during heavy growth periods, people feel good about a winning team and having wins as opposed to only focusing on during a heavy growth period the negatives, or we didn't do this, or you're just sitting there with a whip the whole time, which can be tough to do because as a leader you can't really be focused, or owning your own business, you can really be focused on what are the pitfalls, where am I going to fail here. It's tough to be positive sometimes. So
Julian, same question to you. How would you change different types of growth compared to types of contraction?
Well, I think there's a misconception that change is easier in times of growth, and Matt addressed that, which is when things are good, people are there's an attitude that people are excited. Well, maybe we should introduce this now because everyone's in a great mood and they're feeling good about this. Well, that's when people are like, hey, wait a minute, everything's fine. Why is it that we need to change? Whereas in chaos, people are looking for answers. So when you say we're going to try to change this to make it better, there might be some resistance, but they want the chaos to be over. So to them, we're going to change it, like it's already chaotic, let's just take it on, let's do it. And so, taking that for granted, I think, is something that we see happening a lot, is just that misconception. So it's, especially during times of growth, is to focus on and to almost to communicate it differently. How is this going to help the organization to continue to grow and for us to continue to be on this upswing, as opposed to we're changing for the sake of change, even though things are good, but really contributing to the message of how is this going to help us to continue on the pattern that we're in, as opposed to it being perceived as, wait a minute, we're going to disrupt the growth that we're going through now if we change something. So it's a matter of communicating it in that way. I think is another important point if you think about those two different times.
Great. Any questions from the audience on that particular topic? Contraction. Go ahead.
It seems to me that a lot of the conversation is about a particular initiative associated with change. People are taking on a project, whether it's pricing, people change, the markets change, whatever. But it also, the problem to me is that at some level, change has to be institutionalized in order to survive long term. Organizations have to understand that things need to be changing all the time. Markets change, customers change, products change, technologies change. So how do you balance this? You've got a project that you may be doing that's impacting the entire organization, but the reality is that at some level, it has to be an institutional DNA, part of the institutional DNA, that change is just inevitable and people have to be comfortable with that. So how do you message that, and how do you get people so that the long-term buy-in that whatever is happening today isn't necessarily going to be happening 6 months from now or 2 years from now?
Matt, you want to take that one?
So I treat that one really tactically. So you can use all the adages that the only constant is change and all that. It's BS. But what I like to do is take very tactical actions, and everywhere I've worked, we do after action reviews on just about everything. So when we get done with the meeting, we talk about what went well, what went badly, how can we make this a more effective meeting next time. When we get done with the project, we do the same thing. So and I borrowed that from Toyota, right? Is an organization I maybe admire more than any other firm in its ability to change from a continual standpoint. They don't have a lot of revolutionary changes, but their Kaizen model of continuous improvement is a change model in and of itself, and they after action review everything. Yeah, they're doing all right. So that to me is the single best tactic I've utilized myself in my organization, is to make change more institutional. It's just reviewing, criticizing everything. It doesn't mean we're going to beat every process up, but there's always something that can be better. And I try to model it myself. So when I get done with the meeting, I ask my team, how'd that go? Was I clear? If I brought a staff member out, ask for feedback after this on how I could have been a better communicator in this session, because that's the only way we improve. That's a continual, habit.
So you're essentially trying to create a culture. A habit.
Yeah, habits of criticizing our own performance so we can adapt and do better.
Yeah, I would say, and probably Brendan can address this point, but I'm going to make it a second. But it's I think it has everything it starts with even the hiring process. When you're bringing somebody on board and what you're communicating about the culture, and also what you're exemplifying within the culture in terms of how change is handled. So I think from the onset is ensuring that you're also getting the right people on board for the type of culture and environment, and how the culture and environment handles change. So you have to make sure you have the right people who are going to be able to exist if you have a very fast-moving environment. Are you sure that you have the right people who are on board who exist in that kind of environment? If it's an organization, and I'll speak to my own organization. We're going through a lot of changes right now. Dale Carnegie's 104 years old. Do you think there's a lot of people who've been in that company for a long time who don't want to see change? Absolutely. So we just got a new CEO. This past year has been rapid fire change for us. But the thing that has made the difference also is, and I know I've said this so many times, is the communication of it, but also organizationally for us, do we have the right people at the senior level who are working within the context of this now systems change that we're going through, that are the right people to be able to do that. So I think it's from also, if we look at who are we hiring, who are we bringing on board, what is their attitude, does it mesh with our culture, do they understand what the culture dictates, and sort of even in terms of the industry that we're in. So that's really important, and that the messaging starts from the minute that they walk in the door of what the expectations are. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, we do a lot on profiling for candidates. So we use a predictive index to kind of gauge. I know there's organizations that also use that in the hiring to kind of gauge what type of a person is coming in the door, and what are some kind of baseline fundamentals areas that we can profile off of our most successful people, and what makes them up, and try to apply that to new hires to understand. Because at the end of the day, you have a couple interviews, a few hours, and all of a sudden you're expected to know someone and their entire life history and how that's going to work into your business. It's not. There's no way to be able to do that. You want to set yourselves up the best way possible. What I would echo is, making sure you understand your organization. So let's just say it's a CPA firm, right? The type of individual may be very black and white, and the change that happens in a CPA firm is probably not going to be as big as a dynamic startup medical device organization where there's people that are very black and white, and you got sales folks that are very gray, and you got to figure out how all that happens as you grow really rapidly. So I think at the end of the day, if your culture and your mission as a company is to be able to connect whatever your financial goal and your business goal is with the goals of your employees, so what makes them tick, and you can connect the two, meaning that if just trying to think. If a salesperson is motivated by the competition and the flat screen TV, right? Being able to put in place initiatives that are going to work off what their goals and objectives are going to get you to where you want to be. So I think you really need to kind of analyze yourself as an organization and make sure that to your point you're hiring the right people and that you're setting yourself up, if you're an organization that changes often, to have folks that are adaptable to change as opposed to black and white and are resistant.
How many people incorporate culture into their hiring process, cultural fit? So good enough. How many people, and Matt, I'm going to defer to you on this, fit culture into their hiring process based on the point of time the company's at? So for example, if you hire a whole bunch of people that like change, are you just building a company that likes to change and they end up where that company you referred to is? And is it important to really know where you are and balance that from a hiring standard?
So it's an interesting question. I've never really considered it. I've not seen any clients of mine who have sort of what I'll call dynamic cultural index in their hiring process. I think most of my clients would say they take culture into account in their hiring process. More would say they take individual role fit based on sort of the characteristics of the best into consideration. So I haven't seen that nuanced of a cultural fit assessment. It's an interesting question. I don't know.
Anyone else want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah, I think it's a great question. Actually, it's something to really think about, because as companies go through, say, maybe because of the market, and I'm thinking about a customer that I have now that, they've been pretty stagnant for a while, but they hit the mark on a new product that is now putting their company into rapid growth. And so they are in hiring mode of, hiring new talent to bring on, not only to sell the product, but to develop the product. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is when you're going through that type of phase, I think organizationally, one thing you need to think about is this sustainable over time? And I know this company in particular, they have, based on the success that they've had with one product, have now, have 3 developed ideas of other follow-up products. So it's a matter of thinking about, is this sustainable, and having a really concrete way of measuring the sustainability of it to see, is this the appropriate move to be making now, or are we being too, are we just, firing at all cylinders and taking advantage of the success that we're having now? I mean, I don't think that's really a concrete answer, but I'm just using it from an example of a customer I have that's going through that, and they're asking themselves that question, which is, okay, we're psyched about this right now, but if we're going to be hiring these 150 people, which they think in 2016 is what they need to do, well, is that going to be realistic in 2020? So, these are the questions that they're asking themselves to figure out if they're making the right choices.
Who is that customer?
That's fair.
Try to pull leads. All right, so moving on to the final question, then we'll move into some Q&A. Which stage is the most difficult for leaders? And then the follow-up is, which stage is the most difficult for employees? Brendan, what would you do that one?
So when I talked about the 3 different phases, you have identifying, leading, and managing. Identifying what the vision is and the mission is for change, those typically come with any business, right? You see a problem, you're trying to fix a problem, or you see where you're going, and you have a pretty good idea about how you're going to get there. I think the hardest thing for a leader is building a coalition within the organization, and being able to leverage, those heroes, or put into position those assassins in a way to be able to have it so that you can accomplish whatever your change initiative is as quickly as possible. So, I think, just the language that you use, the communication that you have to, hit 12 times just in order for that to happen. At any leadership role, you already have the idea about what you want to accomplish. Now you got to get everybody else running as fast as you are. So that can be really, really tough. So I think the more you can break it down and understand those different groups and how they operate, and how to leverage each person differently or each group differently will set you up to be able to sustain and manage any change initiative at the end of it. So I think from a leadership standpoint, that would be what I would say.
So you just hit something that I think is important and going back to is building a coalition. And you did a good job with the victim, the wallflower, the assassin, and the hero. My assumption would be that those people can change. So your assassin in one scenario could be your hero in another scenario. Is that fair to say? So going back to the feedback tour, I may trademark that. The feedback tour is doing that allows you to find out who's going to champion a certain particular initiative and who's not going to champion an initiative, just based on how they're reacting. Would you say that's a fair assessment, Matt?
Yeah, I would. I think that you're going to get some people who are disingenuous, who will pretend they're on board when they're not, and others who will, are naturally contrary, are going to argue about everything, but they might actually be on board secretly. So, but I think, yeah, absolutely. The person might change. The feedback tours are critical. I think that's an essential part of the process.
Good. How would change different times of those? Or which stage is most difficult for leaders and employees? It's going to be employees.
Yeah, so I think for employees, it is really struggling with the new reality. And so it's one thing when it's an idea and they're hearing it from the top, this is what we're going to do, and they see that happening. And then what comes down to is when it's directly affecting them and they're seeing how it changes maybe their day-to-day job, the system and the way that they've done things for a certain amount of time needs to change, and just struggling with that becoming the new status quo from now. So just accepting that and getting into the new reality and routine of doing something, because that takes time. That takes time. It takes our ability to be flexible and adapt. Everybody has a different acceptance and or learning curve, whatever it might be. And there's a time of transition. How long that transition is going to take for any given team or individual is subjective, right? So it can take any amount of time. So for the employee, yes, and I would agree with Brendan on it in terms of the leader piece of it is the implementation. And how do we implement, and leaders can't do that alone. So how is it that we have that coalition to be able to do that? And also, as leaders, being able to create that accountability and manage and balance also the other strategic priorities that exist in the business, in addition to managing something that's also shifting the business at the same time.
So as your coalition is obviously helping you do that, and I would assume your hero is kind of the person that you might plant seeds with that's echoing what you're saying out on the floor, because to Matt's point, if we have to say something 12 times, it's going to be like, dude, shut up. Right? I've heard what you said 11 times now. It's like, I only need to tell you one more. But so is the coalition helping translate that message?
Yes, that would be the hope, right? And so it's a matter of also arming those people with the tools. And again, I know I've said this a number of times, but communication strategies, like with that team, what is the message that you are now having the hero saying? And making sure that you formulate that in a way so that all 12 of those times that it's getting through appropriately to say what's in it for me, right? And so, and oftentimes that your coalition can make you or break you, right? So it's a matter of being able to manage that with people, making sure that you have the right people who are messaging out consistently what needs to be done.
There's also we just went through the hardest part. The most critical part is the sustainability and making sure that you're following up and making sure that you're being able to recap and have mile markers behind your success. You go through this huge change initiative, you do all this work, you build your coalition, you put people in the right place, and you have something happen, and then it falls off the map, or the communication isn't there about where you are today versus where you're going, and the success stories of that. If you don't have a strong follow-up to any type of change initiative to make, in the sustaining or maintenance of it, that's a very critical, easy way to unravel all the hard work that you've done. And it probably is overlooked a lot, saying, wow, we just did it, it's all good, quality systems in place, good to go, and then there's no continual follow-up or things that are hit after that. So although not the hardest point, probably very critical.
At any company I've ever been, are great at kicking something off. And what demotivates, if you want to talk about employees, is when things get started and then nothing happens. Or you see very little results. And then change happens again, you see very little results.
The change of the week.
That's right. And that demotivates employees. So that's critical what you just said. It's very important. Is that the three things that I look at is the commitment level from the leadership all the way through the organization. Very important. Number two is the patience. You have to have patience. Things don't happen overnight. And if everyone doesn't understand that, you'll never see the fruit. You want to see the plant. And then the third is the follow through. So important.
I read something that 70% of change initiatives fail. Rather depressing statistic considering how much time and effort you put into change. So I can't agree with that more. Is your point too? Is it's the follow through at the end, then that falls through and that demotivates. But to the coalition point or to balancing your team, you've got to have something helping do that as well. You know, and I know your organization, but you know, Matt could probably lead a lot of change, but he needs a guy like you that's like, okay, what happened? How are we measuring the results? How did it impact our business? And you've got to balance your team to have those, because the team of all change is going to be phenomenal at change. Just going to suck at execution. So.
How many folks are smaller businesses or considered medium to small businesses? Just to raise a hand. About half the room. That's a tough thing to do. You know, if you're the CFO, the COO, the CEO, and everything to everybody, you wear a lot of different hats in the organization. Knowing what your strengths are, especially in change or just leading your organization, and being able to surround yourselves with people that complement you in the areas that you are deficient is probably really important. You know, being able to have that sustainability and things happen and people follow through with the task. It's a true taskmaster. When you're a great idea person, well, that's a great combo, right? Being able to have someone, if you're not great with follow-up and the continuation of idea, but you're the idea person, you know, making sure that you have in your organization, and whether you're small or large, I think, you know, if you're in a human resources team or whatever, being able to have folks that complement you in certain areas allow things to be successful, as opposed to, you know, being able to think that you can do it, and then at the end of the day really falling short in the areas that you know really aren't a strength.
Yeah, great point. Complimenting people is great. Although you never complimented my pink socks, actually, I think sure. We compliment each other quite a bit. Matt, you haven't touched the employee side yet. Let's hear a little bit about the hardest thing for employees.
I think it's like, it's follow through. I think to Scott's point, that's actually what I wrote down when we wrote that is, I'm going to go back to my marathon analogy. It's easy to say I would run a marathon. It's easy to get excited about it. Even I've never run one, so I can't speak from experience. But it's easy to get excited about a goal like I'm going to lose 20 pounds this year, and say you're going to do it and get to the gym the first day. What's hard, and everybody says they're willing to do whatever it takes. So I was looking at some of our leadership research. We've interviewed 135,000 leaders for the last 25 years, and there are two questions that jumped out at me. And one was a question that showed no difference between effective and ineffective leaders. So great leaders said this, the lousy leaders said this, mediocre leaders said this. They all said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So they all had this commitment or stated commitment. But then the question that really sorted was, I build trust in my people by doing what I say to do. So it's that hard, that boring, get out and run a mile today, and 2 miles tomorrow, or 4 miles the next day. So I think that's the hardest part for employees to follow through. And it's the hardest job for leaders today, is to give our people the tools and the support and encouragement to follow through.
And I think maybe Scott, your number 2 actually plays into that same thing for leaders, the patience piece. If you don't have patience, you may give up on an initiative that you started only to do number 3. So essentially, you're hitting yourself twice with that. Okay. We got about 20 more minutes for questions, so I'm going to open up the floor for some additional questions or scenarios.
Without breaking conferences, but could you give us some probably best case scenario in terms of a client that did it right, and contrasted with a client that did it wrong in your experiences?
I could probably do that. So I'll start with wrong, and so I'll just give you a broad overview of what the change was. It was basically a systems and technology change that the company was using a specific technology for their industry that they've been using for 15 years. It become archaic, and they needed to reinvent their systems. And I actually thought about this when we were talking about how does this affect our customers, and so this was going to directly affect their customers and their ability to provide accurate and timely reporting to their customers. And all they did was they sent out a very blanket and initial email to the customer saying, we are going to be changing our technology that supports your reporting. You will not see any change except for in the formatting of your reports that come to you in the 1st and 15th of the month. No timetable, no expectations, no connecting with the customer directly. And I mean, there are a lot of things that went wrong systematically with the change, but their customers, there was a lot of frustration because number one, they were not kept in the loop about when the change was starting, what formatting would be different, just from a very basic level. How would the formatting change the communication of the data that we need? And with this effect, and this particular company then provides also at the end of the year an annual report with this effect annually, how we look at our overall work with you. And so the change actually happened so rapidly that now there was a lot of backlash with customers and saying, I'm not getting the data that I need. This is, and especially with customers that they have been around expecting the same thing for the past 14 years. So they ended up losing 3 of their key customers because of this, and also needed to do a lot of damage control and wasted a lot of time and energy and money because of their inability to communicate the change accurately. But also, I would say that internally, they didn't do their due diligence in really understanding the significance that would take place and affect their customers. They were really thinking about it only from an internal point of view of how it would affect their workers day to day and how they produce their reporting and how are they entering their data. So they looked at it from their perspective first rather than the customer's perspective. That was their number one mistake. Consequently, similarly, I have another customer that we're working with right now, helping them with, it's a change, but it's really an innovation in their business, which is, again, it goes back to, in working with them, it was, okay, number one, how is this going to affect your customers? It doesn't matter how is this going to affect Matt's job every day initially, it's how is this going to affect how your customers receive your product on a daily basis, how you're communicating the change to your customer. Before you communicate to your customer, are you fully aware of the repercussions of the change? Do you fully understand it? And the answers to many of these questions was no. Well, what's going to be great for our customers? Well, how do you know that? What are even into the details and the minutia that your customers are looking for? Are you able to address and answer those tough questions? So looking at it, if the change is going to affect your customers, looking at it from their point of view first, as opposed to the internal point of view. So I think that's, I see those two situations as being similar because it had a high impact on their customers, and the way that they're going about the change now is they've done a lot, months of intensive work to understand how it's going to affect their customers, and just last week sent out a communication, and it was thorough. And the responses they've been getting from their customers are like, thank you for really informing us, all very positive. So taking a look at it from the point of view of who's going to be affected by the change the most versus your customers are what funds your ability to make these changes. So thinking about it from their point of view first, I think is critical.
So that echoes what we've been talking about the entire time, whether it's internal or external communication is really key in this entire process. Additional questions?
Okay, so one of the, I could see two of examples that I've really seen change not work is when people weren't honest about the skill sets that they needed to add or how they were going to get that skill sets into a group. And it could be something from, we were all C-based modeling everything, moving to something that's dynamic modeling. The strategies where we're going to take everybody that does C programming and send them out for 5 months and train them, and then you have 5 months of no product development as you're going through this. So it just seems like a lot of times that doesn't get analyzed. Like, what skill sets do we need for the future state, and how do we develop those internally, externally? What's the balance? So, are there any models or anything that are good successes that you've seen that done that well, that balance that well?
I would only say just from a partnership standpoint with some of our customer base, making sure that you're asking the experts and not thinking that you know all. So really being able to analyze the problem and sit down and not assume things, and reach out to industry experts or whatever the problem or change situation is. Being able to get an outside perspective. You go to the doctors, you get a second opinion in certain areas. There's probably no reason why you can't do that, and that could be different depending on the scenario. But what we've seen is change initiatives the target has changed based upon partnerships that we've had, because, and I'll use staffing as an example because we're in the staffing business. The supply and demand of specific people, right? A customer sitting there going to their customer, yeah, we can build that, no problem. We'll get the people and we'll build the product and it'll be all good. And taking on a project that is probably way bigger than they've ever taken on before. We've had companies come to us and say, can we do this? Is this realistic? And then they pitch that to their customer versus them sitting there saying, no, we can do this, we'll figure it out later. And the supply and demands of specific talent just don't exist in New England, or whatever it may be. So I think looking out at industry experts and having partners that can talk open and honestly about the ways you're going to achieve whatever that goal is, I think are really important, so that you're not kind of in your silos or bubbles of influence
So, Tom,
Tim.
are you looking for like a model that they can refer you to, like the?
Well, I guess even
Connor
like
model,
in the
or-
different stages, how often are you evaluating that, right? Because it's an analogy I heard out of one of the changes was like, I own the Boston Celtics and I tried to make them the Red Sox and not change any of the players on the team. It's just a formula for you're going to crush because, right? But at the same time, there's certain people you can develop, and there's, and a lot of it has to do with your time frame. Do I need that expertise tomorrow? Do I need it in 3 months? So I guess like you're going through this change. How often are you evaluating? How well does my skill set, need to match what my future model is, and am I on track to get there?
So Matt, maybe I'll refer that to you.
Yeah, for me, the best clients I work with are thinking about this constantly. So the talent development or replacement is a continuous strategy. So they're always looking at, what's the next best hire we can make, period. It's always, and usually it's one choice of others. Usually those organizations are not growing so quickly they're just taking anybody who can find them here. We're trying to get the best picks we can. So that process should be continuous. I think the evolving skill sets. You got to decide if you need it now. You gotta pay for it. You gotta go buy it from the outside. If you need it in some period of time down the road, do you have folks who can learn it? And then ask the question: can they learn it better than somebody who already knows it from the outside? And those are tough decisions. It depends on the technical expertise required. There's also just raw DNA. So you might be able to teach somebody to do computer programming, but if they don't have the quantitative brain, they might not ever be good. They might be able to know how to press A and press, whatever else you got to press to program something, but they're never going to be great at it. So you have to look at sort of the raw wiring that people have as well, which is why, screen tests and profiles really are a valuable tool to use.
And we know that C people don't always like to do C++ and vice versa, right? And it's like following, so you're not going to take this person and make them do that because they're going to want to go through C. But I guess maybe even just on top of that is the scope and size of the project, I think, is going to also determine how much you're monitoring and how much change you're willing to take on. What you just said sounds pretty massive to me. You're going to take an entire development team and move them over to C++ and you're going to lose 5 months of production. Well, I hope you have a ton of cash in the bank because then it's going to take you another 12 months to launch the product and actually start selling it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I would hope that you're looking at the entire scope of the business implication as opposed to just let's change for the sake of change and let's make the CI C++.
I've got a question that sort of goes in line with that. So you're changing out your model, right? Your technology model. So during that time of change, you're assessing people's skill sets, you're looking at those that can be developed, the ones that are going to buy in. Now, to bring somebody in to do the same things in the new technology, whatever it might be, it's not going to be in today, productive tomorrow, right? There's that period of time that's a build-up, and it's sort of about maybe in product development there's that gap, right? How do you explain that to people in the leadership? I'm part of that too, but how do I communicate that to say, hey, it's going to take us 5 months?
How do you communicate?
Yeah,
Great
how
question.
do you do that? Because everybody down who's doing that change sort of gets it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're still setting the same expectations as before.
Good. That's a great question. I think it reverses kind of our entire conversation is to Matt, to Scott's point of like, do you have leadership buy-in? How do you do that? Everyone else knows we need to change, but leadership doesn't see the line to it. How do you communicate that? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, so how do you set that expectation for us?
Should we do that together?
Yeah, well, I would say there's a couple of things, which is, first of all, we have to think about ultimately what's the most important thing to them, okay? And this sounds so simple, but it's, how do we put it in their context and their language that there's a relation to what their day-to-day is? Because maybe, ultimately, if I think about it is, if let's just say we're talking about the C-level, is that do they necessarily care about the details of how a process is taking place 3 levels down from them? No, they don't. They just want the job to be done. So how do we use the language and understand what high level perhaps overview they need in order to see how it impacts the overall initiative from their perspective, which might be dollars and cents, which might be productivity, which might be profitability, and communicate the change in terms of the language that they care about. I mean, it's actually not any different from how we would communicate it throughout the ranks of the organization as to what's in it for me individually. And I think it's more about, again, seeing it from their point of view, but also speaking the language that would help them resonate with what that actually means from their perspective. And not maybe the perspective that you see it in as like there's going to be 5 months of a delay, but what does that mean for them in terms of profitability of the change that they're making, or the product that needs to be launched as a result. I'm just making these things up, but it's about creating that message from their point of view. We want to shift and change our message directly. It depends on who we're talking to.
So from the employee standpoint, what's in it for me? From the C-level,
Right.
what's in it for the business?
Right.
What's
Exactly.
in it for the business and how does that impact it? So presenting a business case versus tactical.
Correct.
Okay, good. No change will happen if people don't understand the benefits. Build a coalition. Understand who your victims are, your wallflowers, your assassins, and your heroes are, and get that coalition to help you work towards change. I wrote down a book. I don't know if anyone's ever read Walk a Mile in My Shoes. It's a book that you flip over. It's kind of like a quick little read, but it's one that's written from the management perspective, and the other is written from the employee perspective. It just gives you two completely different perspectives, and I think it's important to put yourself in their shoes, because at one point we were all the people being affected by change. Kind of, why the hell are they doing that? I don't understand. So I think recognizing that we were in that position at some point in time brings a different perspective. Don't sacrifice the current business model for the sake of change. I think you hit that, Matt. Is don't let your current business fall apart because you're changing something that may or may not have the impact you want. Remove barriers and recognize wins. Those small wins keep the momentum going. Julian, you said speak the language of the people you're working with, so know who your audience is and know how to communicate that. And I think most importantly is communicate. That really sounds like it's 12 times is a lot of times. It sounds like a broken record, and I'm sure all of us have sounded like that broken record at a point in time. But the benefit is to the company and when people start to get bought into that and they see the value of it. Is there any other additional things that you guys want to throw out there?
You captured it well, Ryan.
Excellent. All right, well, let's give these guys a round of applause.